Welcome to Mind Love, episode 151. Today's episode is all about tiny habits for big changes.
Changing your life and transforming your life is easier than you think if you do it in the right way. And if you understand that it's just tiny things, there's no reason to delay, there's no reason to procrastinate. And the method is not about being perfect at all. The method assumes you might end up not doing what you intended. That's all part of the process. Just like when you learn to speak French, you won't speak it all perfectly, but you have to speak it imperfectly in order to get to competency. Same thing. And so just view how you're doing this shift in your life differently and really try to embrace the idea that you change best by feeling good. And when that happens, it is this very unexpected shift that can happen in how you see the world, how you see yourself, and how you see the challenges that you're facing.
Turn up your frequency with Mind Love. Bite-sized brain hacks for seekers, dreamers, and doers. It's time to give your mind a little love with your host, Melissa Monti.
Hi, friends. First of all, if you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you're always updated about new episodes. Plus, you want to know basically the best way to give back to your favorite podcasts? Actually, go to the iTunes app and leave a 5-star review. Reviews are scientifically proven to make me love you more. That's just how it is. I love you when you leave me a review. You sit in my heart for days at a time. No, but seriously, they really help the growth of the show. They're probably the number one thing that you can do besides supporting my sponsors or joining the membership. So it's an easy, free way to give back to a podcast you love. And if you do leave me a review, send it to me at MindLoveMelissa on Instagram, and I'll send you a free meditation track. So I want to share one of my favorite reviews from this week by Firefly8. She said, she's inspired by every episode. I've been listening to this podcast for over a year, and it is a constant inspiration. In these challenging times, every resource we have that uplifts us is gold, and this podcast is that for me. Thank you, Melissa. Well, thank you so much for leaving this review. It really warmed my heart this week. But now let's get to the good stuff. You know how your phone and computer have a power saving mode? Well, your brain has one too. It's the autopilot system that takes over when you're doing repetitive things like driving to work or brushing your teeth. Your body and brain work in perfect harmony, almost like everything you do is carrying out a mission with total efficiency, so you can perform better without even thinking about what you're doing. But the catch? The system might be super valuable, but it's also what makes it so hard to change our habits. There have been times in my life where I have felt so deeply controlled by my habits that I couldn't even tell if I was the one making the decisions anymore. When we feel like we're under control by some other force, it can honestly feel pretty hopeless or make you feel crazy. I really feel like my habitual patterns have been my kryptonite in this lifetime, which has kind of sucked at times. If you've ever dealt with a really deep habit like nail biting or some kind of addiction, then you know what I'm talking about. At times, you convince yourself that it's not that big of a deal until you try to stop and it feels like you can't. And suddenly you feel like you're not the one in control of your own mind or body. And in a way, that's true because you've handed over that power to these autonomic processes. Why can't meditation or going for a run be so ingrained that you couldn't stop if you wanted to? Well, what if it can be? As I learn to actually understand what's going on to create these habit loops and how to break and build the neural pathways, it's become really empowering. Suddenly, I am the type of person who can show up for herself and who can start and keep journaling, or who does yoga every day and meditates regularly. And now when I look back to that girl 10 years ago, it's hard to believe that we're the same person. But I do have so much compassion for her because she is the one who really put in the work to create the me that I am now. So today, we're going to empower you with some of these same tips. And we're going to talk about the actionable science behind building and breaking habits, like all the tips and tricks for real and lasting change. And we're talking to BJ Fogg. He's a behavior scientist and the founder of the Behavior Design Lab at Stanford University. He's not only a brilliant researcher, but he also teaches industry innovators how human behavior really works. He created the Tiny Habits Academy and wrote the best-selling book, Tiny Habits, The Small Changes That Change Everything. And I have to tell you, this book is so good. 3 key things we will learn are the elements of behavior change and how to approach it, how to use emotion to create lasting habits, and how to form communities to help make change a lot easier. But before we dive in, do you ever wish you could start each day with a little message from your higher self? Just sign up for the Morning Mind Love for daily inspirational messages right to your inbox. I get messages from people every single day about how the Morning Mind Love is their favorite way to start their day, or that the message that came through is exactly what they needed to hear. It's kind of like your own personal inspiration oracle. Just visit mindlove.com and sign up right there on the homepage. Plus, you'll get some amazing free gifts when you do, like a free guided binaural affirmation meditation designed to rewire your brain to your highest self. And you'll get one of my favorite tools, a booklet of my personal power lists to help you gain clarity and live each day with intention. And it's all completely free. Just go to mindlove.com to sign up. Or if you're out and about, text the word morning to 33777. That's morning to 33777. And now let's welcome BJ Fogg to the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
So to start out, I am curious, how did you start studying behavior change?
Well, I was a very young child when I started, and that's the truth, actually. I was born into a Mormon family in California, not in Utah. And whether you're in California, Utah, or anywhere, growing up Mormon means you pay a lot of attention to behavior, things not to do and things to do. And it was just part of me growing up. Fast forward, became interested in rhetoric, a couple decades later. And then that transitioned to social science, specifically studying how human behavior works.
So I read on your website that you had discovered a model for behavior change, but when you first discovered this model, you didn't really quite understand the depths of it. Can you go into that a little bit more?
Yeah, so thank you. So I'm going to share, it's like an answer to a riddle. When you don't know the answer, it's very, very puzzling. But once you hear it, it's like, well, of course, that's what it is. And that's how it was for me. And I call it the Fogg behavior model. And it's essentially this. A behavior happens when, any behavior happens when there's motivation to do the behavior, there's ability to do the behavior, and there's a prompt. And when those 3 things come together at the same moment, motivation, ability, prompt, the behavior happens. And that's one way to talk about the model. There's other ways of looking at it, but it's just like, really? Can it really be that simple? Can it really be B, and I write it out as B equals MAP? Can it really be that something that you can write out in like 3 seconds describes all behavior types for all people of all ages and all cultures? And the answer is, surprisingly, yes.
Well, if it is that simple, what do you think that most people are missing when they're trying to change their behavior?
Well, I think what they are missing, or what is happening in a lot of cases, is there's so much information out there about how to change your behavior that does not work very well. So there's a culture and there's myths that keep getting perpetuated. And so people believe those, of course, because you hear them, you read about them, and there are headlines and bloggers talk about them. But the reality is, a lot of the traditional thinking about behavior change does not work well. So people have been, depending on how you want to look at it, either distracted or misled, depending on how you want to look at it. And that's really what my work has been about the last 10 years. And more recently, my book, Tiny Habits, is here is how behavior actually works. And here's a step-by-step process where you can change your habits quickly and easily.
So one big takeaway that I got from it that might be one of the myths that you're referring to is that info about why you should do a thing doesn't really change people, but information about how does change people. And I know that I'm an entrepreneur. I've gone through so many different entrepreneur courses and read Simon Sinek's book, and there's so many things where it's like, start with why. This why is your motivating factor. So are you saying that it takes more than that? Do you need both? Or what do you mean by that?
A big part of my work is to put motivation into the proper perspective when it comes to behavior change. What doesn't work is picking some new habit that you don't really want. Let's say, running for an hour a day. Like, you don't really want it, but you feel like you should. And then you're going to find a way to motivate yourself to do this thing you don't want to do, really. That doesn't work very well. You can do it temporarily. Like, we've all been there, right? Where it's like, okay, I really should do this, but I don't want to, but I should. So somehow I'm going to make a public commitment or join some program that I think will change me or something like that. That doesn't work. What does work in the proper role of motivation is to pick new habits that you want, that you're already motivated to do. So you do in some ways start with the why. You start with something you want to do rather than seeing motivation as something you tack on later.
So I'm a little confused by that because I feel like a lot of the times I'm trying to change my behavior. The reason that I'm not doing it in the first place is because I don't want to do it. So if I wanted to do it, wouldn't I already be doing it, or what am I missing?
No, surprisingly, there's a lot of things that we want to do that we just haven't designed into our lives yet. To get clear on this point, we really need to separate the distinction between the outcome and the aspiration, what people often call the goal. I called it either aspiration or outcome, like I want to sleep better, versus the specific behavior that will take you to that outcome or aspiration. And those are different things. So certainly there are so many aspirations that we haven't designed habits into our life for, or not enough, like reducing our stress. Like right now, who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want to reduce their anxiety? Everybody wants that. But then it's finding the right habits that will help you get there. And so don't pick habits that you find distasteful, or don't pick habits where you have continually failed. Like meditation works great for some people, but for other people, it's just really hard to do. So don't pick that one if you don't want that one. In my own life, the way I reduce anxiety is I get out into nature. And just nature, connecting with nature, whether it's gardening, swimming in the ocean, hiking. I've attracted geckos to my lanai here in Maui. So watching the geckos, those are behaviors that I want to do and I can do, and they help. And so the exception is this. There's a behavior like running for an hour a day that you don't want to do, but you must. And I'm going to say that's not really an exception, because running serves another purpose. What is it? Is it to sleep better, to lose weight, to have more energy? There are other ways other than running. So what you look for is what is a new habit that I actually want to do, and it will take me to an aspiration that I want as well. So motivation is built in both at the higher level, the result of what you're doing, but also ideally on the habit. So if you don't like to run, don't pick running. If you don't want to meditate, don't pick that. You have so many other new habits you could be doing that you like more and that you actually enjoy and that you're motivated naturally to do.
Before we go deep today, I want to give you a little gift, and I want to give it to you every single day. It's called the Morning Mind Love. I know how life can be. You're all fired up after an inspiring episode, and then a new day or a new challenge comes at you, and it's just hard to keep up that energy. Well, the Morning Mind Love is kind of like an oracle from your higher self to help you start each day with a positive focus. Plus, when you sign up, you get 2 free gifts, a 30-minute binaural meditation and 30 days of journaling prompts to help you remember who you truly are. And it's all completely free. So join over 9,000 people and go to mindlove.com to sign up, or text the word morning to 33777. You know what's crazy? After all these years of hosting Mind Love and talking to some of the world's leading experts, one of the biggest eye-openers for me has been just how much our gut affects, well, everything. When my gut feels good, my mind feels clearer, my intuition is stronger, and I just feel more balanced. And that's why I'm excited about Zoe, a science-backed nutrition company that is totally changing how we understand our gut health. They've created the most scientifically advanced at-home gut test and built the world's largest microbiome database. So when you get your results, you're not getting generic advice. You're getting insights about your body that other companies just don't have the data to provide. There's also just so much misleading health information out there. Food companies even pay influencers to promote ultra-processed foods as healthy. And that's why I love that Zoe relies purely on science. real science. The randomized controlled trial showed that participants were 4 times as likely to report better sleep and more energy, all thanks to the info from the largest microbiome database on the planet. So go to Zoe.com and find out what Zoe membership could do for you. And because you listen to Mind Love, you can use the exclusive code MINDLOVE10 to get 10% off membership. As a Zoe member, you'll get an at-home test kit and personalized nutrition program to help you make smarter food choices that support your gut. That's Zoe.com. Use MindLove10 at checkout. Trust your gut. Trust Zoe. I think the physical action thing really resonates because I've talked to so many people that have such a hard time working out. They've never really been physically active. I'm the opposite. I've been active my whole life, so it feels really odd when I'm not. And I'm like, what can I do? Just let me move my body. But for those people that are thinking, well, I do need to lose some weight, or I do need to just get into shape or move my body more, and they don't yet have something that they like to do where they're like, well, I know I'll like doing that physical activity. What came to mind for me was possibly, like you said, going out into nature instead of having it necessarily be like hiking as the activity. It can be like exploring a new part of nature or something like that, where you're tying in something that you want to do and it's the physical activity is sort of the byproduct of that. Am I on the right track?
Yeah, exactly. And for that, I mean, there's only a handful of things like getting out into nature. And for me, I'm living in Maui right now, so I go surfing every morning. And that's not like I'm going to go exercise. It's like, oh my gosh, I get to go ride waves. I get to go connect with the power of nature. I get to go play around. Now, along the way, it's really, really physically exhausting, but that's not really why I'm doing it. It's a nice side benefit. So if you can find something like that, and it ranges all the way from rigorous sex to dancing to, hobbies that might get you moving, but maybe you don't think about it as, and certainly don't just pick traditional, I got to go to the gym and walk on the treadmill for an hour. Find, explore, do things that you like.
The other really big takeaway that I got that just was in one of those moments, like you said, where looking in hindsight, it's like, obviously, was about really the how to do something. And the reason that this resonated so much, even though it seems so simple, is that I have taken a lot of entrepreneur courses where they really drill in the why. And so when I'm losing my motivation, I'm like, okay, remember why I'm really doing this, right? And that worked for me for a while. And sometimes it still does. Like it'll revamp my motivation a little bit or get me re-inspired. But what ends up happening is I can procrastinate over and over and over again until I realize that the first thing on my to-do list shouldn't be the first thing on my to-do list. It should be to write the to-do list. It should be to map it out. And that, first of all, is such an easier step because what will happen in my mind is that it's swirling in my mind about like, well, how am I going to do this? Do I even know how to do this? Is this a good idea? And then I can talk myself out of it and it's easy to put off. But if the first step is just to brainstorm the next steps, that's an easy one to show up for. And I find that happens. Going back to the physical activity thing, I just end up coaching a lot of people into like physical activity in my personal life because I will be traveling and be like finding a yoga studio and showing up and doing all these class passes. And people are like, how do you do that? When I'm starting a new gym, I always feel so intimidated. And I'm like, I'm used to doing this step now, but maybe you should like drive by the yoga studio or drive by the gym or like go check it out before you're actually going to sign up for the class so that then you know where you're going to park. You're already familiar with the place. And then it doesn't seem so tedious when you're also being like, okay, I'm going to go do this thing I normally don't do. You have like you've like cleared the path for yourself.
So many good nuggets in what you just said, Melissa. Wow. Once upon a time when I was traveling for business and once upon a time when I was staying in hotels, one of the habits I did, and I did it in the Tiny Habits way, was as soon as I unpacked my bag, which was another habit, like it fully unpacked, I would go and see the fitness facility at the hotel. Even if I had no intention whatsoever, like I was like really busy, maybe speaking and flying out. But similar to the effect you're describing, just by seeing the fitness facility, you go, well, now I know where it is. So now it seems a lot easier to do. And, maybe I will come down tomorrow morning or come up. So just often if you just take that first step, it then opens the door to continuing. In fact, I want to say always just take the first step. So if you find yourself procrastinating or resisting, and Melissa, I'm not talking to you because your point said this so well. I'm talking to people listening here. Part of what Melissa's point is, if you find resistance to doing, whether it's exercise or anything that you've got mixed feelings about or you're ambivalent about, just take the first step. In fact, that's one of the tiny habit recipes I've created for myself. When I find myself resisting doing something because it's hard or it's scary, or even if I don't know why, I say out loud to myself, just take the next step. And sometimes I'll add BJ, just take the next step, BJ. And it's remarkable what impact that can have.
I actually really love calling myself by my own name. There's something that always snaps me out of my mental loop, because I think one thing I talk about a lot is how we identify with that voice in our head that's talking us out of something. And so we're like, well, I don't actually really want to do this. And then it just drills it into our identity even more. But if instead I'm treating that like little voice sort of like a child, and like, Melissa, just do it, or you're going to feel so much better after you do this, then all of a sudden I can see it for being irrational and not what I really want, and just maybe the selfish version of me in the moment or whatever it is. And it's really helpful.
Right on. And as you practice behavior change in the right way, and I make this point later in the book, that creating habits and changing behavior that lead to a transformation in your life, that's the result of developing skills of change. And over the decades, nobody's really talked about creating habits as skills of change, but that's what it is. And so you develop these skills, and one of them is to be able to get yourself to take the first step. And another one, a little more extreme, is this skill is not in the book. There's about 20 some odd in the book, but this one is more like being willing to kind of trick yourself, like trick yourself. And, related to this, you called yourself Melissa, I think. That was cool. Yeah. I like that. Related to this, I have a little timer right here, and you can hear it beeping. And so sometimes, in addition to say, BJ, just take the next step, I'll set the timer and say, okay, I really don't want to do this project, but I'll set it for 7 minutes, go. And after 7 minutes is done, I can stop. So you kind of trick yourself. But guess what happens? When it goes off in 7 minutes, most of the time it's like, well, I'm going to keep going. This wasn't so bad. I'm making lots of progress. So yes, I can hand out that tip to people. And yes, use it, but see it as a broader effort where you can practice the skills of change and you can get better at them. And then when you want to do something big, something that might be more challenging, you've skilled up for that moment.
I love that one. And it reminds me of one I learned when I was trying to write more, or I got a counterintuitive tip about when you're writing, when you're done for the day, stop mid-sentence or mid-paragraph. That way, the next day, you would know exactly where to pick up instead of trying to end your full, complete thought. And then it's like you're starting fresh the very next day. But if you do it the other way, you're almost eager to finish that paragraph and you have it in your mind, and it's like putting a bookmark in it.
What I love about that is it fits so well into a lot of what I talk about and have for 10 years. It's like, make it easy. So rather than worrying about motivation and trying to find these either creative or disastrous ways to motivate yourself, take that energy and make the new behavior you want, the new habit you want, easy to do. So invest in my model, that's the ability portion. So rather than fretting about, oh, I'm not motivated, I don't have willpower, take that and focus on and get really good at making behaviors easy to do. And that's what you're doing with this writing hack. You've made the getting started in your next session easy to do and also motivating because you're excited to do that piece. So it's a beautiful hack, and people can take that essential pattern and apply it so many other places in life.
Another thing you talk about is modifying your environment. My husband and I have done this, and we're both active people, so it's actually more because it's a priority to be active. But we have a whole corner of our house where most people would be putting living room. But instead of another couch, we actually put down padded floors. He has a pole because he trains doing like the human flagpole and stuff.
Nice.
And we've got yoga mats down. And every time we come downstairs, though, that's the first thing we see. And it's in a beautiful little spot. It's comfortable. Everything's already out. And it's just so much easier to just dive right in instead of being like, well, now I've got to go get my mat and find the weights and all of that.
And that's part of making the behavior easier to do. So you have this design portion to redesign your context or environment to make the new behavior you want easier to do. So where I am right now, I'm in one of the rooms in our home that I call the Zoom room. Now it's completely dedicated to Zoom. I close the door and I can talk to you and I can teach my students and I can run my lab. But even in my Zoom room, Alyssa, as I look around, there is a dumbbell that I can lift. There is a foam roller on the floor that I can bring. There is a wedge that allows me to stretch my heels. This is not even the place where I think of, like, I'm going to do exercise or be fit. There's other things. But just surround yourself with these opportunities to stretch, to do resistance, to do what you need. And you said the word earlier, Melissa, identity. When people can shift their identity to like, oh, I'm the kind of person who stays active. I'm the kind of person who does resistance training. That might only be lifting this little dumbbell here and a little tricep extension once a day. But if you're doing it and feel successful, now that's important. You're feeling successful doing it, then your identity shifts and you naturally see and welcome other opportunities to be active.
What are some of your tips for actually feeling successful when you're doing it? Because I know a lot of people tend to have this negativity bias in their brains. And so even when they do show up to do something, it's like, well, I didn't do enough or I missed yesterday. And they're still kind of stuck on the ways that they're failing. So how do you help people to highlight the successes?
Two approaches. There's more than that, but I'll just mention two and we can keep going if you want. Number one, lower your expectations. Lower the bar. I know. So many people are not going to want to hear this. Have lofty aspirations. Have really big milestones you want to hit, for sure. But understand the way you get there is through these tiny changes. So reduce, so when it comes to habits, and the way you're going to actually get to this big thing you want, lower the bar and make it so easy to do that you can do it every day without much effort. And that's part of the tiny habits, not the whole thing, but part of it is just lower the bar. And guess what? Don't raise the bar on yourself. So this is really counterintuitive. So if my habit is my tiny habit recipe, after I pee, I will do 2 push-ups. And I've done that for years. Now, I almost always do more than 2, but I don't raise the bar on myself. And the reason why, if you go 2 push-ups to 5 to 8 to 10 to 15, there's going to be a point, 20, 25, where it is no longer tiny, it's no longer easy, and you've set yourself up not to succeed, but to fail. So by raising the bar, you're actually taking your place to yourself to a point where you will fail. Now, in the tiny habits way, the mindset, and this is one of the skills, is you set the bar low and you keep it low, but then you allow yourself to do more than 2 push-ups or read more than a paragraph or tidy more than one thing in the fridge. And you count the extra credit. Okay, so you conceptualize, wow, I'm doing 5 push-ups or 8 or 10. Good for me. I'm the kind of person who goes above and beyond. So it's not like you always just do tiny things. You just set the bar low so you can do it very, very reliably. And then you allow yourself to view the extra as going above and beyond. You are the A+ student.
I love that because I tend to set really lofty goals, and I used to be really bad at breaking them down into tiny habits. I'd just be like, I'm going to be a whole different person by tomorrow. This is going to work out. And I've realized, though, that it's way more rewarding even, because even if I am able to stick to the large aspirational goal for more days than I think I can, it feels hard and I can feel my internal resistance the whole time, and it's not really that enjoyable. But if I start with the smaller things and actually remind myself to praise me along the way and just be like, oh, you're doing great, it feels really good, which is why one of the things that was so helpful for me when I finally did stop procrastinating on my dreams and start everything was every single day at the end writing down my little wins. And what happened when I started writing down the wins of the day, not only did I want to win more each day, but I also trained myself to view more categories of things as successes.
Right on. That is such good guidance. That is such good guidance. I mean, a big part of what my work is about in the book is helping people understand that you change best by feeling good, not by feeling bad. And this feeling of success, that emotion had never been named. So in the book, I name it, I call it shine. And what you're really doing to wire in habits in a way that will transform your life is you're learning to feel shine. You're welcoming shine into your life. And you can do it very deliberately in a technique that we call celebration in Tiny Habits. So let's say one of my new habits is to tidy up, the pens on my desk at the end of the workday. So let's say I arrange them and then I say, good for you, BJ. Or I do a fist pump or I just smile. Anything that helps me recognize and feel successful, feel shine. Because it's that emotion that wires in the habit. And it's that emotion that motivates you to do it again in the future. So it has two effects. It rewires your brain so the habit forms, but it also you look forward to, I get to tidy my pens again because then I know I'm going to feel good. Now, once you get the skill of allowing yourself to feel good, then you will find so many aspects of your life to do it in, just so many. I'll share a challenging one that I'm doing right now. It's a hard one. I have a niece right now that needs a lot of help and guidance. And she might even call me while we're talking because she calls me like 5 or 6 times a day. And it's frustrating. And, you wonder, is she listening? Is she not listening? But what I do is when I'm done with the call, I just think, okay, BJ, what's one thing you did well in the call? Good for you. So despite all the stress that's coming down with COVID and the fires and the smoke and her situation, you were able to pause on your work, talk to her, try to help her, and here's at least one good thing that you did. And that it keeps me open to taking her calls because it can be very, very wearing. So the ability to see the good, and here specifically to feel successful about something you've done, no matter how tiny, that's what the subtitle of my book is all about. The small changes that change everything. One of the small changes is the ability to go, good for me, or recognize your success. And I love your idea of listing at the end of the day, here's where I succeeded.
I just had a mini epiphany while you were explaining that. And it goes back to about 1.5 years ago. I was trying to really encourage myself to be productive again. I go in waves of my productivity. It'll be like really great for months. And then all of a sudden I'm like burnt out. And then I'm like, okay, let's get back on this train. And so I was in one of these low periods trying to get back on my productivity train. And at the time I was trying to change a few different habits. I had also realized that I was having like a nightcap glass of wine more nights than I wanted to. And so I was also cutting back that. And so I thought to myself, well, if I get what I need to get done or have these tiny wins, I'll celebrate with a glass of wine. And it was weird because something about it like caused me to go into a lower period. And while you were speaking, I just realized that it's because I was currently trying to make sure that I was the type of person that didn't need the wine, trying to unwire this habit. And even though I liked having that glass of wine, a part of it actually made me feel less successful, which might be why it kind of messed with my head.
That's a really interesting example. And I think in some ways the takeaway, at least what I'm hearing from this, and this is for everybody, including me. I mean, we're in such a challenging time in the history of the world. I mean, so many things are up in the air and anxiety provoking and so on. It's just be really nice to yourself. At least I was raised like, set a goal and you just endure and you have to have stick-to-itiveness is what my parents talked about and all that kind of stuff. And I'm proposing that no, right now, the opposite is the strategy, not only for being more, I guess, mentally, emotionally healthy, but achieving more. You achieve more by being nice to yourself and having compassion and not beating yourself up and so on. And if somebody's listening to this that doesn't believe that, give it a shot. just be so nice and understanding and nurturing and supportive of yourself, and do it for a few days and see what happens.
What I find interesting is because we have heard so many times that, just do this for 28 days or 33 days, or it's always changing depending on who's guiding it. And suddenly it'll be a habit. But it's not the repetition, it's the emotion that really creates the habit. And that makes so much sense, because if you look back on those 28 days and you had coupled that with anger or disappointment or beating yourself up, you're not going to want to keep that going. But even if you didn't make the change quite as big as you'd hoped to by the end of those days, but you had coupled it with these little celebrations and loving yourself and feeling like you were getting better each day, then instead of being the type of person that forces yourself to change and beat yourself up, and then who knows if you come back to it, you've become the type of person that celebrates your own successes, so then you seek more successes, and then by the end of that, then you're just going to keep spiraling into more and more of the changes that you want to make.
Yeah, spiraling upward. Yeah, and there's this thing about, yes, we can self-trash talk ourselves and kind of browbeat ourselves into doing something, whether it's, tidying the desk or running for an hour a day, but that doesn't lead to creating the habit. It's just like, oh, I did it. I didn't really want to, but I was able to somehow use motivation or willpower to get myself to do something. That is a losing path. And in contrast, how you're describing it really maps what I've seen. So I've coached over 40,000 people personally in creating habits. And I've done it through email and for over 8 years, a few hundred people a week. So I've seen the patterns that work and what doesn't. And there is this effect that when you do something and feel successful about it, no matter how small, that thing then blossoms or grows bigger. It also spawns other positive behaviors. So naturally, other positive habits form. And you think about yourself differently. And in the case of you're looking for lots of changes in your life, you become less fearful about looking at change, because the fear comes from, oh, I might fail. Well, if you lower the bar, and if you know it's so simple, I'm not going to fail on this, you also become curious about what else. And then you'll see the change process as like an adventure, a journey, something that can be fun and interesting. And the journey itself is fascinating. And so those are some of the benefits you get by treating yourself really, really, really nicely and allowing yourself to feel successful and getting rid of that inner critic that probably most of us grew up with, where, Melissa, I grew up with the intent, and I set, this objective when I was in 8th grade, that I was going to get all A's for the rest of junior high and high school. And I worked my butt off and I did it. But I think this really opened me to rejecting that kind of approach. Once I did it, I got very sad and even kind of depressed. It was like all those sacrifices I made so I could have perfect A's. Why did I do that? The cost was so big. So yeah, we've all been there where we thought, oh, I have to do this big thing. And the reality is to transform your life in ways that matter. And especially now that have so many pressures and distractions and anxieties, tiny is the way to go, and being nice to yourself. So that's why in each chapter, I think it's every single chapter, right? At some point I say you change best by feeling good, not by feeling bad. And if you're feeling bad, that's a signal, like back up, approach this in a different way. And then kind of goes back to the top of our discussion that it's not your fault that you've tried other ways to change and it didn't work. You've been given faulty ways of doing it. And these old myths about, 30 days and 66 days to create a habit, those are not true. The myths about that you have to be perfect and don't miss a day, that's not true. There's all these things that have set us up in the wrong direction. And I guess it's kind of become part of my mission to help set the record straight and invite people to a much, much better way of changing your life.
I think that's so important because I've dealt with that before. I have historically been a habitual person. I'm really trying to focus on what I follow after I am. So I've always said I have a really addictive personality, or I am a habitual person, but these are things that I want to be fluid. So historically I have been. However, I dealt with that same thing with behavior change, where there's certain things that I've been able to change pretty rapidly, and then other things where it it just seems like I'm destined to do this for the rest of my life.
Mm.
And in the last couple of years, though, I've really shifted that belief because I've read books like yours and I've found other ways that actually work for me, or I'm becoming more introspective about why did this habit easily change, but this one didn't when they both seemed as deep seated, and actually getting curious about it because
Good.
that alone changes the way that I'm talking to myself about it. Instead of, you just can't do it with this, or you're destined to do this, it's more like, well, what is this? And it's a learning opportunity, which automatically just drops my armor, which makes me more open to change, and it makes it easier to take the next step.
So good. I love that. My book, Tiny Habits, is 300 pages. And probably the biggest criticism of the book is like, oh my gosh, there's so much in the book. And some people, not everybody, some people just wanted like a little pamphlet. And like, sure, I could write, 1,200 words and give you little tips, and those tips would work. But that would be me like a piano teacher just teaching you chopsticks. Sure, I can teach you to play chopsticks on the piano, but that's not playing the piano. That's playing chopsticks. So instead, the journey you're describing and what I'm trying to share with people is understanding how behavior works, understanding how to create habits, understanding how to troubleshoot habits, how to really change, not just play chopstick, not the little simple little tip that gets you a little one-off, but really teaching you deeply to understand your own behavior and other people's behavior, and then how to design behaviors into your life that you want and do that reliably and get good at that.
So another thing that really was a game changer in my life when I was trying to transform my life from what it was actually surrounding myself with people that showed me that it was possible. Mm-hmm. And because if you're trying to do something like trying to be an entrepreneur and no entrepreneurs in your life, then there's going to be this huge cloud of just doubt that it's even possible. It's like, only those types of people. But you broke it down in a way that I've never heard anyone talk about it before. And you talked about destination groups versus journey groups. Can you talk about that?
Yes. Yeah. So in my Stanford lab, we spent a year studying and researching how people change together. And there are certain domains in which it's very important to change together. And then there's certain domains within the household, like the way you eat. It is much, much better if you change together. The way that you consume media, how you sleep, and so on. Making these changes together works much better than one person trying and everybody doing the old way. And so as we went out and we looked at programs that were effective in helping people change, and we mapped it out systematically to what are the aspects of this. And one of them, we called it journey groups and destination groups. Journey groups are groups that you're part of where everybody is on this journey together and trying to achieve either eating in a certain way or exercising in a certain way, or we're all learning to write every day to produce our novel or what have you. So you're all kind of novices progressing together. Destination groups are where you embed yourself within a community or a group or whatever you want to think of people who already do that behavior. And so let's say you go to a CrossFit gym and everybody else is experienced CrossFitter and you show up, well, you're the newbie there, but now you're part of a community of people are already doing the behaviors that you think you want to do. Either one can work. And we mapped out, sometimes it's better to be part of a destination group, better to be part of a journey group. Sometimes you'll have a leader that will help you. Sometimes the leadership will change, especially within a destination group where everybody is skilled and qualified. So we mapped out these patterns, but that's a pretty basic distinction. And I'll just get to one of the headlines from the research. The more complicated the behavior is to do, the more you want to look for a destination group where people already know how to do it, because those people can give you tips and tricks. Let's go back to the writing example. Let's say you joined up with a bunch of novice writers and you all wanted to write daily. Well, that would help you a little bit, but you're going to be much better in meshing yourself, if that's a word. I think it's a word. Mm-hmm. Among people who already have a practice of writing daily, because they will be role models. They'll give you tips and tricks. They'll give you encouragement, which is a type of motivation. So they know, that they're successful at it, and they'll share with you, hopefully, and get you going toward their level. So it depends on the complexity of the habit. whether you want to go with journey group or destination group.
That makes a lot of sense because I've been a part of both types of groups. I just didn't have a name for them. And I've found sometimes in journey groups, it's really helpful because, for example, entrepreneurship, it's like sometimes in a destination group, it's hard to be vulnerable of where I actually am. And then sometimes in journey groups, though, it's easy to be vulnerable, but then you can kind of feed off of each other's struggles, and then you're just hearing why this is so hard. And so it's really helpful to go back and talk to a coach or a destination group and be like, okay, this is what I'm struggling with. And somehow they've already cleared that path, whereas you and your journey group are kind of still like raking the weeds at the bottom.
But let me speak up for journey groups. You're exactly right. But what happens, and you'll see this in a lot of group settings, there's two dynamics that happen. Yes, you're there with essentially peers who are still, who are working toward what you're working toward. And Melissa, we naturally compare ourselves to others. It's just built into us. But there are two types of comparison. One is, oh my gosh, here's this other person in my group and I'm doing better than they're. Good for me, right? So we'll do like a downward comparison to feel like, yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I'm not doing as bad as that person. And then we'll also do an upward comparison like, oh my gosh, look at her. She's kind of just like me. I can do that. She's doing better. I can do that. So you can helpfully compare yourself to somebody who's doing worse and helpfully compare yourself to somebody who's doing better, all within the journey group. So if you allow yourself to do that rather than just saying, I'm not the best. I mean, that would be the wrong mentality. I'm not the best in my group. You've got to have an appreciation for, you don't have to be the best all the time. Melissa, that may ring true for you because it does for me. That you see how you're doing well and you also get inspired to do better, all within the journey group.
Yeah, I like that a lot because I actually really feed off of healthy competition. I like to help people. And so what I find myself doing is I will hear people's questions and then it'll spur me to find the answers or to be looking at what I'm doing in a different way because I'm just really curious how other people are understanding it. And it helps me to just get a more complete picture about everything instead of just seeing my own perspective or seeing the way that I learn. And I don't know, I've always done that since I was a kid. I've just been like, wait, what question did you just ask? And then I'm like, oh, interesting. It's just, I don't know why I do that, but it's funny.
Yeah. And just social media is helping us and not helping us in this regard. There's some people I follow who just seem to have incredible ways of eating and working out and can perform all these feats, and they read a book a week, and it goes on and on and on and on and on. And so, this has been well-covered territory, but unfavorably comparing yourself to those people and just seeing how you are less than is not helpful. So there's two big guidelines in my work, and I call them maxims. One, we've already talked about, and the maxim goes like this: help yourself do what you already want to do. We addressed that earlier when we talked about motivation. There's more to it, but that's help yourself do what you already want to do. Number two, help yourself feel successful. So if you're looking at social media and you're following some influencer and she's perfect and her home's perfect and her kids are, and you're feeling unsuccessful, that is not helpful for you. You should unfollow that person. If that person makes you feel lesser or unsuccessful, it's not helping you in your bigger quest to change. Now, if that person inspires you and helps you see your successes, then that's great. But those are the guidelines. So earlier, I kind of went after the tradition, and so many books and so many bloggers are saying, here's how you do it. Well, they're recycling the old stuff. Okay, so be skeptical about that. And what I'm presenting in my work is new stuff. And the two sentences to remember, if you don't remember any of the details of what I've shared, or if you don't want to get my book and read it or watch all my free videos or whatever, the things that work to create lasting change is things that help you do what you already want to do and help you feel successful. So if goal setting helps you feel successful, terrific. If it doesn't, don't set the goals. If having an accountability buddy helps you feel successful, then do it. If it just makes you feel guilty, don't do it. So you can take all of these techniques and all this chatter around behavior change and view it through the lens of these two things to figure out if that's appropriate for you or not.
Wow, it's one of those things that's so simple, but it resonates so true. It's like every time I've ever made a lasting change, I've felt really good doing it. I've never like fought tooth and nail to show up every day and then suddenly realized I was doing the thing I never wanted to do. So it is so simple. But and I think what it comes back to though, and it seems like everything that I've ever explored on this podcast comes back to, is you have to start by understanding who you are. And that might be the first step, because we have so many of our aspirations, I think, is programming based on what people around us are doing, what we think is going to look good, what we're told we should be doing. And then we wonder why we have such a hard time living up to those expectations. But if we spent more of that time not figuring out how we should be, but figuring out who we already are, then it would be so much easier to design the habits that were right for us, or to aspire towards the habits of just enhancing the person that we are instead of completely changing that person.
Yes, you are right on. And I just want to reassure everybody that no matter who you really are, you are sufficient and you have the capacity to create new habits and transform your life. You don't have to be that influencer you're seeing all the time that's perfect, so you don't have to pretend to be somebody else. And let me just give a quick example that might be, I hope it works. Most everybody listening to this learned to walk. Walking is complicated, but you learned it, okay? And some people learn faster than others, but pretty much everybody listening to this, barring a disability or something, learned to walk. Now, that if you took a baby and you said walk and the baby stumbled, you wouldn't get mad at the baby. You would say, oh, good job. Look what you did well. Now keep going. That's how you should think about your journeys that you're facing that are so intimidating. It's like a baby learning to walk, and you don't get down on the baby for stumbling or for taking it slowly. You see that as progress, and that's how you should look at what you're doing. And you do have the capacity to do that. And I think, Melissa, because so much that I've shared is based on my research and data, but this is speculation, but I think it's right. I think the letting go of the old ideas, especially the ones about shame and guilt and I have to have willpower, I have to have motivation, and being nice to yourself and focusing on new habits that you want and recognizing and embracing your successes all along the way. I think that kind of approach will be the future of behavior change. So that's really what I'm trying to do in my work and my book, is like, here is a radically new way of thinking about it and doing it. And I'm putting all the chips on the table that this will be the future of how people change the behavior. Now, it's going to take, I don't know how long to be part of popular culture, like everybody thinks in this way, but some of that's happening now, and it's really exciting to see. So yes, be nice to yourself and embrace even the smallest of successes. And when you find yourself resisting, you can kind of trick yourself to take the next step. And then when you go, oh my gosh, that worked, don't feel bad that you tricked yourself. Say, man, that's a skill. I have a skill of how to get myself started. Good for me.
Well, thank you so much for all of your work in something that has such power to change so many lives. So for listeners that are interested in learning more about you and your book, where's the best place for them to connect with you online?
tinyhabits.com is the place you can learn more. Tiny Habits, the free 5-day program. There's no strings attached. I've been doing that since 2011. And then also how to get the book or get resources from the book. bjfogg.com. Fogg is my last name, is a way to get other aspects of my work. And then I got a bunch of videos, and I'm all about helping people. So those would be the starting points, and those link you elsewhere. And I'll just end with this, and maybe this is my closing statement. Changing your life and transforming your life is easier than you think if you do it in the right way. And if you understand that it's just tiny things, there's no reason to delay, there's no reason to procrastinate. And the method is not about being perfect at all. The method assumes you're going to I guess some people might call them mistakes. You might end up not doing what you intended, but that's all part of the process. Just like when you learn to speak French, you won't speak it all perfectly, but you have to speak it imperfectly in order to get to competency. Same thing. And so just view how you're doing this shift in your life differently and understand and really try to embrace the idea. And I know for some people it's going to be quite a shift that you change best by feeling good. And when that happens, what you'll find, because this is what my research shows, that there's this transformative thing that happens, and people describe it as like magic, like, oh my gosh, it feels like magic. Well, as a scientist, I can't say it's magic, but it is this very unexpected shift that can happen in how you see the world, how you see yourself, and how you see the challenges that you're facing.
All of the links from this episode will be at mindlove.com/151. So your challenge for this week is to find one habit that you really want to build. One thing that's the most meaningful. And remember what BJ said, find something that you really want to be doing, not just the end result that you want. So if you want to be more active, make sure that the physical activity is actually something that you want to do. Or where you're doing the physical activity is somewhere that you want to explore. Have fun with it. So the thing that's worked for me the most in building new habits is really reducing the friction of the habit I want to create. So I make it easy and accessible. You want to give your brain a signal that it can't ignore by creating some sort of physical change in your environment. So for example, say you want to start walking your dog after dinner each night. Drape his leash over the corner of the dishwasher or keep it somewhere near the table so you can see it. And to ingrain this even more, give yourself a little reward or somehow celebrate after you successfully accomplish this new habit each night. Or if you want to start doing more family game nights, stack your favorite board game on top of the remote or the TV so you don't just default into your own patterns. Or add another layer to this by promising that you'll watch your show after one round of the game. One more example. Say you want to reduce unhealthy snacking. Stop buying unhealthy snacks. Or have your partner be the gatekeeper for your guilty pleasures. That's what I do. It's not a joke. Seriously, my husband has to hide the chocolate, and he gives me 1 or 2 pieces per night. I have to ask him like a little kid if I can have my daily chocolate. And sometimes I ask him for more and he says no, and it's ridiculous, but it works for me. And it's the only thing that works for me because I still want to have the chocolate. And if I don't keep it in my house, I will buy it anyway. It's a whole thing. We won't even go there. But there are ways around these little addictive tendencies without having to deprive yourself altogether. And remember, the more creative you are, the bigger your awareness jolt will be. So you should have a lot of fun with it. If this episode was really helpful to you, or you have a family member or friend or partner that has a habit that drives you crazy, send them this episode. Or take a screenshot and share it on social media and tag Mind Love Melissa and Mind Love Podcast. I would also really love to hear what tips from this episode are working for you. Again, as I said, my kryptonite has been habit change. And so on one hand, it's really empowering, but on the other, there's always a new habit that I'm working to break or build. So I want to know what's working for you so I can try to apply it as well. And finally, for everyone that left me a review last week, I love you so, so much. You made my whole week. It's so, so helpful to me. I can actually see a little boost in the charts with each review that I get. So know that it means so, so much to me. Whatever time that it took you to do that, I'm so grateful. So as always, thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning into Your Higher Frequency with Mind Love. Head to mindlove.com for a free gift to keep your vibes up until next week.